So we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of how we view sleep and what that looks like when we get into assessment. Dr. Kanapari, you can Google him, is the director of the Yale Pediatric Sleep Center. He has a website. It's tough to navigate, so bear with it, but there's a lot of information on there that's helpful. There's a short video on melatonin, which is a great one and a resource that I often give to parents when we start working on sleep, just because he says it much better than I do. So it's a great resource. It's a few minutes, but there are some nice resources on his website. He also has a book, which we purchased as well, and I found it helpful to read through. It's a really straightforward, very parent-friendly book. So one of the things that he talks about and one of the things that we focus on as well is these habits that we develop. And when we talk about sleep training, really what we're looking at doing is shifting our habits, whether they're habits through the day that impact our nighttime sleep, whether they're habits just before bed that are going to impact our nighttime sleep. So finding individualized and sustainable routines and habits, sustainable is key, that are in line with our values, what's important to us, and what we're comfortable with is always our goal when it comes to developing sleep plans. When we look at what we do and kind of the framework of behavior analysis, our ultimate goal is to answer the question why. And that's where behavior analysis, that tool, comes in handy. Why? Why are we waking at night? Why are we having a hard time falling asleep at bedtime? If you are waking at night, why can't you put yourself back to sleep? If you're waking early, why? What's happening in the morning that you're waking early? So there's a series of questions that we go through and kind of scenarios that we want to understand so we can get a really, really clear picture of the why. Why is somebody engaging in these types of disruptive sleep behaviors? Whether it's, I know for my kids, it's running around like crazy at bedtime, which happens. That's the time they want to jump on the bed. That's the time they want to somersault and do all sorts of crazy things. Avoiding sleep. Why do we do that? If it's at night awakening, what is it that's prompting a child to come into a parent's room versus staying in their room? And maybe they're laying awake in their room just as much as they would coming into your room, but why are they doing that? For teens, that question of why, what's stopping you from jumping into your bedtime routine? If you're up at night, what is it that's interfering with your ability to go to sleep? Our question is always why. And I think it's important when we frame these questions that we also understand sleep ties into that somehow. So when we're looking at our framework for sleep, we do sort of follow the ABC format, but it's a bit different. So typically, when we think of a typical ABC kind of structure framework, we're looking at something that happens before a behavior, the behavior itself, and something that happens after. And we usually have the ability to shift either one, what comes before or what comes after. Those are both variables that we can tackle. Those are both conditions that we can start shifting. So the difference with tackling sleep and framing it is that sleep itself is the reinforcer. It is that last step, and we can't manipulate that because it's a biological drive. We can't teach sleep itself because it's a biological drive. What we can do is set the conditions for healthy sleep. We can set the conditions for falling asleep, and that's what we can tackle. So typically, a lot of the plan will include things like, what is the temperature like in the bedroom? What's the lighting like in the bedroom? Are we laying down? Are we sitting up? Are we reading books? Did we have a bath? Did we eat? What is it that's leading up to bedtime? And for us, we also look at the entire day. So often our assessments start with when did you wake up and what did you start doing? So we kind of do it a little bit backwards. But this framework is really important because we know that biologically our bodies create or crave sleep. So once they start sleeping, once our body starts sleeping, it wants to keep sleeping. It wants to keep meeting that need because it feels healthy and it feels better and our body can function. So once we develop those healthy habits, they actually form fairly quickly. Most of the sleep treatments, depending on what the problem is and how quickly we tackle them, you can see improvements in sleep within 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes within a week, depending on what the sleep issue is. So it's important that we're able to kind of analyze in general what's happening. I've lost my mouse. To understand what's happening. I love technology. I should not be in charge of technology. So sleep training, like I said, is mainly an antecedent intervention. It's mainly something that we tackle kind of at the front end, and we can't really control the latter part of it. So when we're going about our assessment, there's a tons of questions that we're asking. Some of them are related to, tell me about your day, talk to me about what happened when you woke up, what did your meal schedule look like, what did after dinner look like? We are definitely going to ask all of those questions. But the assessment piece also includes things like, what does healthy sleep look like for you? What are your sleep goals? They're not goals that we prescribe. Do you want to continue co-sleeping? Do you want your child to sleep in your room in a separate bed? Do you want to continue to do these pre-bed activities because they're important to you? Are there cultural considerations we need to take into account? What do we need to know to make sure that whatever it is we design, whatever it is we suggest, however it is we come together and put together a plan, that it's feasible, sustainable, you feel comfortable with it, and it's something that we can implement and maintain. It's really hard to maintain something or implement something that you don't buy into or that you weren't part of. So it's really important through the assessment process, we're asking all of those questions. Once we go through the assessment, we start to develop some suggestions and plan, and usually we have a few different options. And these options are based on what an individual would be comfortable with or a parent would be comfortable with. Do we want to make a lot of changes at once? Do we want to make a couple changes at once? Do we have some prep to do? It's not uncommon perhaps for us to recommend some medical questions be asked or ruled out before we start. So there may be sort of some pre-sleep treatment tasks that we need to take care of. We usually do like to see a sleep diary. It's helpful to get a really concrete and objective idea of what sleep looks like. I know that when we started working on my son's sleep, and definitely when we talk sometimes with parents about sleep, memory's not so hot. And so what we remember in terms of bedtime or how often they woke or what that looked like, our memory, again, isn't so confident. So having that objective way, that sleep diary that we can look at, helps to get a really good picture of what sleep looks like. Through the assessment and plan development, it's also really important that we're working with all professionals involved. So if there are other professionals working alongside, we want to make sure we're including them in the plan and their input, particularly if there's medical considerations or if there's medication involved. We want to make sure we're working really closely with those that prescribed it or those supervising medical professionals so that we are taking into account all variables and we're being really conscious of what changes we're making, and we're doing that in collaboration with others. It's really important that we're working as a team. Most of what we do has been remote. And this started before the pandemic, but it slid right nicely into the pandemic when most services did become remote. We are able to provide support remotely. Ideally, when it comes to tackling sleep, it's not a great idea to introduce a stranger into the bedtime routine. So we don't typically come to the home when it's bedtime or come to the home to kind of support sleep overnight. Kids, adults, teenagers, everybody finds it weird to have somebody they don't know in their home all of a sudden. So most of the support is done remotely, whether it be Zoom, messaging, phone call. We practice, we talk, we problem solve, we try to get everything done we can prior to implementation, and then we're there the night that the treat plan starts. So we want to make sure we're there to provide direct support, whether it's messaging or a phone call, so that any problem solving that needs to happen can happen right away. Sleep, working with parents, being sleep deprived is hard. Tackling sleep when you're sleep deprived is hard. And I think often what we come across in assessment is families that are kind of at the end of their rope. Usually when they contact us, it's like, no, we're done. We need to sleep. This needs to get fixed. And usually what's also happened is they've been told we can't fix sleep. They've been told that your child has a specific medical issue, a specific diagnosis, is autistic. Sleep will never happen for you. And that's not uncommon for a parent to be told. And I think we're usually the first ones where they hear, no, you can sleep again. We need to define what that's going to look like and what that optimal sleep is going to look like, depending on what variables we have to work with. But sleep can happen, and so it's okay to seek it out. And the idea that sleep isn't going to happen because of a diagnosis or because of a symptom or because of an identity, sleep can always happen. It is just a matter of understanding sleep itself, understanding the individual, and coming up with a plan that everybody's comfortable with, and then we can typically tackle it.
Telehealth and parent coaching. So Hillary did a nice job of introducing this. Before we started our telehealth practice, we did look at the research to make sure, how can we do this well? Is this feasible? Does this work? And so there was some studies done, and luckily it is feasible, and it's quite common, especially in the medical industry. So when it comes to tackling sleep problems, it's tough to be there in person to support and coach in the moment. Like Hillary said, someone new in the environment, it's not going to work. There are a couple other barriers as well to receiving services. So there's a lack of trained practitioners specifically in this area. There are some financial costs associated with it, and sometimes those extra costs aren't covered by our universal healthcare or extended health. So that can make it another barrier for families, as well as practicality of supporting families in the home. So this is where telehealth services can help to bridge that gap. Make sure I got this right. Perfect. So the advantages are reaching rural areas to accessing services. So I did get a breakdown. I think we did get a breakdown of where everyone is today. And many people were not from here in the Lower Mainland. So it's nice to be able to provide telehealth services and know that sleep support can be done remotely. It also is more convenient. You don't need to travel to a clinic to get support and get that education. It can all be done online. And with the pandemic and us being forced to go online, I think it allowed a lot of practitioners to become more fluent in their ability to provide services from a remote model. Choosing the methodology for support can be determined by the parent. It doesn't necessarily have to be depicted by the professional. Again, not worrying about that expert model, but more seeing what works for families. So we've supported families video conferencing, messaging, phone calls, check-ins, the like that. There was a study conducted by McClay and colleagues, and they found that telehealth services were really helpful in specifically that sleep area. And they found that they were able to alleviate insomnia symptoms for the children in the study. They also found that working with adolescents via telehealth and communicating and working with them that way, they were also able to make progress, which is great. The programs in the study ranged between 2 to 6 weeks. So again, it's not a lengthy process. Sometimes it can be long. Sleep doesn't change overnight. It's a slow process to get the biological systems back in sync and in order. Okay, there we go. So we're going to dive into sleep assessment. I'm going to talk about the different assessments available. So the first step to understanding any sleep problem is to capture the entire sleep picture. And this can include questions from daily routines, meal habits, bedtime routines, the bedroom environment, and a lot more. We do a lot of talking during the assessment process. Gathering all of the information is that first step. Then through discussion, learning about family values and goals will help to drive the design of the sleep plan. The questionnaires that you can go through, there's a couple here, and I pulled Dr. Mallow's Family Inventory of Sleep Habits. This one's, I've looked at it, and it's a great way to go through specifics of the sleep environment, as well as other areas that could be interfering with sleep the most. So in this one, the Family Inventory of Sleep Habits, you'll see some examples of questions, and these will be the questions that will be in the poll, so we can go through some together. There's questions about exercise, naps, understanding what the bedroom is used for, And this can be found actually online easily. If you just type family inventory of sleep habits, the PDF will pop right up. Okay. Some other examples that we've based our sleep assessment process on is Mark Duran's Albany Sleep Problem Scale. This one, again, is easy to fill out. You circle different numbers based on rating, and it goes through similar questions. So it goes through your bedtime routine, things that happen during the day that might be impacting sleep, as well as specific problems, just to get a good picture of what's going on. Dr. Greg Hanley's sleep assessment and treatment tool is another one that we've used and we've learned about. And this one is more detailed. It's an easy fill-in document where I'd say it can be used. Parents can use this one too, and they can kind of go through it. But it is professionals usually use this one to kind of guide their questions. And it provides some different strategies as well, depending on the sleep problem. Now, I've added in a section here for a data sheet, just an example, so that if you're wanting to track and just figure out what does sleep look like, and maybe looking at the bigger picture and seeing what is the timing, where is the circadian rhythm, where is that sleep pressure coming in, a sleep diary, sleep journal is your best bet. And it's as easy as putting in times. Again, in the night, sometimes that can be difficult, but working with that together. So I've added in the key variables that will probably give the biggest impact and give you a really clear idea of what to track. We have time in bed, which is your first row there, with it, and then time asleep. So those two variables, you'll see how long it's taking to fall asleep. And you'll know if the bed or the bedroom starts to cue sleep if they fall asleep within 15 to 30 minutes. It takes about that long on average. If it's longer than that average, and there's no sign of tiredness, and you actually start to see more alertness and play, and maybe there's stimming behavior or just chatter, and there's no sleep at all, it's unlikely that the bed and that room and the environment is cueing sleep currently. So we'll discuss strategies to solve this problem during the case studies. Time asleep, so looking from time to sleep and time awake, you'll now have an idea of how much total sleep is had in that 24 hours. So in this one, I haven't put a nap section, but if there are naps, tracking naps in another row will be helpful, so you can add in how much sleep is happening in 24 hours. I've also included night wakings on this one because that, again, is common, and so figuring out how long are those night wakings lasting. If the night waking is 15 minutes, you can just write 15 minutes. But seeing when the night waking happens can help you identify, are they waking up probably during a natural waking, as Hillary mentioned, when you go through those sleep cycles, you do start to get into that alert phase. So that might be where theirs is, and it can give you a clue of how fast and where they're moving through those sleep cycles. Through seeing the timing of sleep onset and wake up, this will give you a better understanding of that body clock. So always imagining that those graphs, I can see them all the time, but again, you'll have the slides so you can see them for yourself and refer back to it. Now, before any plans are put in place, medical considerations are really, really important. If you start to address things behaviorally, but the medical hasn't rolled out, you're not going to see the results that you're looking for, plus you could possibly cause more harm. So with the medical considerations, I've put 8 here, and I'll just briefly go through them so you can maybe look out for signs. You've got dental issues. So if there are dental issues, this could be causing pain or discomfort. So for infants, you've got teething, but for kids and adults, maybe there's cavities, and they have difficulty explaining that they're feeling pain or discomfort. But you can kind of notice by the behavior. Gastrointestinal issues, if there's irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, urinary tract infections, those types of things that can impact sleep as well, as if our guts are really active and things are going on there, that cycle is out of sync, and which means if that cycle is out of sync, then it could impact sleep cycle. Anemia and low iron, these are also important to rule out, as this can be associated with restless legs and disturbances in sleep cycles and reaching and hitting those certain marks. So getting anemia or getting low iron tested, getting iron tested through blood, as well as noticing how's their diet. Is there enough iron in the diet? Because that could also cue you, okay, maybe I should just go get it checked and rule that out. Anxiety, so understanding anxiety. Again, when coming up with a plan, being aware of this and then working collaboratively with other professionals who specialize in this area will be helpful, because anxiety can increase that overall cortisol during the day, which then impacts sleep at night. Seizures, sometimes night wakings could be a sign of a seizure, so you want to make sure you've ruled that out as well. And traumatic brain injury. So if there's a history of traumatic brain injury, understanding how that's impacting the body and how that impacts the individual, and then working again with someone who specializes in traumatic brain injury, because it's not straightforward. Lastly, if there's any snoring or breathing with your mouth open, if your child snores or they're breathing like really heavily and you can hear their breath through their mouth and they're not going through their nose, this could be a sign that there's something blocking the airway. For example, ruling out swollen tonsils or inflamed tonsils and just keeping an eye on that. Adenoids in the nasal passage, so if there's blockages there, you'll start to hear snoring or just some sounds. We should be quite quiet when we're sleeping, mouths closed, breathing through our nose. Snoring for kids is not typical, and in adults also should probably seek out support. It could be a sign of things like sleep apnea, which can happen in kids. It's more common in adults, but just being aware of that and how that can impact the quality of the sleep.
So we are going to dive into common sleep problems. You can see there's 4 listed here. Again, these are going to be tackled in the case studies as well, but I'm going to go through each one and talk a little bit about what we see commonly and what some kind of generic basic strategies might be for each one, and what our worries would be for each one. So for night awakening, we know that through the night, at some point, we all wake up at least twice. The first waking is usually within 2 to 3 hours of falling asleep. The last waking is usually around 4 a.m., maybe 5 a.m. We all come to a natural wake state. We don't remember because we go back to sleep, but it does happen. So with a night waking, it could be what's happening there is somebody is waking at that natural point and just isn't able to put themselves back to sleep, or something's off. This isn't how I fell asleep. I realize suddenly now I have to go to the bathroom. Maybe I'm thirsty or hungry, or where's mom? I need to go find them. Or, hey, my phone's right there. Let me just quickly check my email. And now you get stuck scrolling at 2 o'clock in the morning. So night wakings sometimes can be natural. When we talk about night wakings, that's where the why is really important. So what is happening in the night awakening that we need to address? Are we somehow meeting reinforcement? Meeting reinforcement would mean, if I'm seeking out mom, do I find her? If I'm seeking out dad, do I find him? If I want to go through my phone, am I able to pick it up and am I able to go through my phone? So those things that I'm seeking out, am I able to meet access? Am I able to meet that contingency and find them? That in itself can build a routine and a habit, which can then perpetuate the night waking. So now you're waking every night to seek out that thing that you need to get back to sleep. And we're going to talk a little bit about sleep dependencies after this as well. Typically with a night awakening, if you can tackle bedtime and if you can get a really healthy routine and you can get somebody falling asleep on their own fairly quickly, night wakings tend to reduce. So naturally on their own, they kind of take care of themselves because we've addressed the bedtime issues. For those that persist, it's really taking a look at what's happening. So if I'm waking at night and I need to go to the bathroom and I want something to drink, am I turning on all the lights? Well, if you turn on all the lights, your body immediately starts to become more alert. It's going to be harder to fall back asleep. That night waking is going to last a little bit longer. Do I start thinking about all the worries from my day? Do I start thinking about the thing that's about to happen the next day? Do I start to kind of ruminate on things? What starts to happen during that night waking? And we can tackle that piece to ensure that if we do wake up, it's as minimal and quick as possible, and we're able to get back to sleep because we haven't really interrupted that wake or sleep state. Right? We're not interrupting that peak of melatonin that usually hits. For early awakenings, sadly, there is some sad news to go with early awakenings. My little one was definitely an early waker for a while, and it's not uncommon for us to talk with parents whose kids are up before 6 a.m. or sometimes between 5 and 6 a.m. And sadly, that is an okay time to be awake. Anything before 5 a.m. is usually considered to be too early. That's still nighttime conditions. But anything after 5 a.m. is kind of fair game. There is such a thing as night owls and morning larks, and then somewhere in between. And it's kind of an even split, 30, 30, 40. So at any point, it could be that your child, the individual you're supporting, is a morning lark, which means getting up at 5 a.m. is just, they're hardwired to do that. That is just the natural rhythm that they have. Flip side, it could be they're a night owl, which means trying to get them to bed any earlier probably isn't going to work because that's not where their natural cycle is. So for early wakings, we really do want to take a look at what conditions are you waking to. We talked a little bit about throughout these routines through the day. And what's really important to note is that your circadian rhythm needs something to anchor the passage of time. And usually we do that through routines, meals occurring at the set time, school activities, work activities. There's kind of a rhythm to your day. And your circadian rhythm is stronger when that rhythm is consistent. So when it comes to early wakings, if somebody is up at 3 in the morning and they encounter any of those activities they may encounter during the day, it could signal to their body it's time to be awake. Social interaction, meals, TV, work. So if I'm up at 3 in the morning and I pull out my laptop and I start working, chances are my body's going to think, well, that's a daytime activity. So we are absolutely right to be up right now, and the next night you'll probably get up at 3 again. So being aware when you are waking early that you're maintaining night conditions, that's really important. Disruptive bedtimes. That can happen for a variety of reasons. Here's where the why is really important. Maybe I don't want to go to bed. Maybe there's something else I'd rather do instead. Maybe I'm having to stop something that I really like, or I'm not finished something. Maybe it is just something fun to do, like my kids that jump all over the bed. Disruptive bedtime, again, we want to tackle the why and figure out why is this happening? What exactly is going on? Is somebody having trouble settling? Is there something else that they'd like to be doing, but they can't communicate it as clearly as they would like to? Remembering that all behavior is communication and really figuring that why is important. So what is happening at this point? What need is unmet? What is it that we need to tackle at this point so that somebody is able to calm their body and get to a point where they can have a restful sleep? And there's different strategies for disruptive bedtime. It really just depends on why it's happening, what's happening, the age of the individual, and how we can best tackle it. I think that would probably be the most individualized sleep problem because it varies so widely. When it comes to the delayed onset to sleep, it could be related to insomnia, which is difficulty falling asleep. But delayed onset is different than disruptive. A delayed onset sometimes could mean there's actually a sleep-wake cycle disorder. It could mean that there's a circadian rhythm disorder, which means that your sleep cycle just isn't in line with your typical sleep-wake time. So we know that in general, if you were to guesstimate, like maybe anything past 11 p.m. is kind of late. But if you have a circadian rhythm disorder, it could be that more midnight 1 a.m. is when you want to fall asleep, which means you might be sleeping till 11, which means you're missing part of your day. So a delayed onset to sleep can be something that's underlying. So it could be that there's an underlying disorder, a sleep disorder there we need to tackle. It could also be related to anxiety. So maybe there's something that is preventing me from falling asleep. Maybe I'm thinking about a lot of things. Maybe I have some worries. Maybe I'm afraid of the dark. There are a bunch of reasons why I may not be able to fall asleep right away. Typically, falling asleep within 30 minutes is pretty healthy. If it's taking longer than 30 minutes, you're tipping towards staying in bed a little bit too long. And we talked a little bit about pairing activities with bed that are related to sleep. So if you are laying in bed scrolling through your phone for too long, your bed no longer cues sleep. And so being aware that the longer you're in bed awake and doing other things, the harder it will be for your body to just naturally get into a sleep state when it is time for bedtime. There are different routines and kind of ideas around bedtime routines. We're going to give some examples through the case studies. You can use some visuals. You can use some cues for here's what bedtime is going to look like. It's important to match that to the individual need. I have definitely worked with a couple of kids where those visual schedules were more anxiety-provoking than they were helpful. So being aware that it's not a rubber stamp. We don't just use visual schedules because it's really important to make sure it's meeting a need for the person. But we could definitely use something like that to kind of navigate the routine. What is this going to look like and how are we going to get ourselves to a calm place? The biggest piece to look at when it comes to sleep problems are sleep dependencies. Sleep dependencies can be healthy and they can be unhealthy. A sleep dependency is usually something that is paired frequently with falling asleep. So I might need it to fall asleep. I need it to be present to fall asleep. It could be a favorite pillow. It could be a routine that's just, maybe you write in a gratitude journal right before bed. I saw something in the comments about creative writing. Maybe that's something that you do before bed, and that seems to be paired with my falling asleep behavior as I start to think about other things, which there's some interesting research on that I'll talk about when we address that question more in full. But it's important to note with sleep dependencies that usually where they become unhealthy is if they're not available at a night waking. So if a child falls asleep with a parent and they wake a few hours later and the parent's not there, it is a sleep dependency if I need to go seek out the parent. So now I can't fall back asleep without the parent there. Or maybe I can't fall back asleep without a full stomach because I'm used to having a big snack before bed. Or maybe I can't fall asleep because I fell asleep with the TV on and now it's off. And so I need it on to go back to sleep. Sleep dependencies are probably the most common sleep issue that we tackle, and that usually pops up with night wakings, what's going on with bedtime if we're trying to fade something. It can also tie in with early wakings if, again, we're up 3, 4 in the morning and how I fell asleep is not the same as the conditions right now. I'm going to need to seek those out. So sleep dependencies are a huge piece. And basically, you can just ask yourself, do I need this thing to fall asleep? So you can try a night without it. Or if I wake at night, do I need this thing to go back to sleep? And that usually signals that it's a sleep dependency. Typically, rule of thumb, it's unhealthy if you can't take it with you. So if you think about traveling or if you think about conditions changing somehow, can I take this thing with me? Or can I make sure I have it during the night waking? And if I can't, if the answer is no, then chances are you need to start working on fading that out of the bedtime routine so that you're able to pull it in a little bit more during the night.
Okay, so now we'll go through some questions around some sleep dependencies, and let's see where everything lands. So the first one is, do you go to bed with a full stomach? Yes, most of the time, sometimes but not often, or never. Last meal is an hour and a half before bed. See how we have some people who are eating right before bed? Sometimes but not often. Again, I think it depends on activities throughout the day. Sometimes you have to have a late dinner because of stuff that went on. So just understanding that, I think being aware of it is helpful. I know that helped me. We had 32. I think it's settled down. Perfect. And we'll tie that in. Let's do another one. What is going on in your room when falling asleep? So I put a bunch of different options, and this can be for you or this can be for your child. So is there a podcast playing? Do you have a sleep meditation? Is the white noise on? Is it complete silence? Is there a fan? I know for me, I sleep better with a fan. I have never used a white noise machine personally, but I know that does help some kids. I think last night, actually, the fan in Hillary's room was too loud, so it actually caused her to wake up. We've got some silence and podcasts. And I think when you're answering these questions, think about if you do wake up during those natural night wakings, do you need these things to fall back to sleep again? If you do, Like if I accidentally fall asleep watching Friends or one of my favorite TV shows on my iPad, which is so dim, and I wake up and I really can't sleep, the one thing that will put me right back to sleep is to turn it back on, and that tells me it's a sleep dependency. And that's the same thing with parents. So if a parent's in the room, and if you're not in the room during that natural night waking, they're likely to come seek you out, and they fall asleep like that as soon as they come and find you. We got lots of silence here. This is good. Sometimes silence it works for some. Okay, and I think there's one more. So before we go into the case studies, which will be in the next part, I just wanted to do a quick analysis and see, and you can answer more than one, so you can choose multiple answers here. So what sleep problems are you or your child experiencing right now? So are you experiencing the waking up at night? Are you having difficulty falling asleep? Not enough sleep? Those early wakings, and then challenges with the bedtime routine. I'm glad everyone, it's nice to see that everyone, I hope it's helpful to see that other people are experiencing the same sort of problems. And we're going to talk about all of these in the case studies, so stay tuned for that.